Hey, what's going on, Retic Loungers? Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the Retic Lounge. I'm Lucas, your co-host, joined by Nathan Katz, your co-host as well. Today, we're going to be getting into an episode about is breeding right for you? So we're going to be talking about just general breeding information. What's really cool about what we're going to be offering is we're actually going to be providing some inside information on what breeding's like for new keepers and new breeders. There's not a lot of information out there, so make sure that you guys listen to this podcast. And then we're going to be talking about the good and the bads of breeding, and so that you guys can, by the end of this episode, decide if breeding is really going to be the right thing for you. Catch us every Friday here at the Retic Lounge. We're going to be uploading our episodes on YouTube if you want to join us and watch our videos. If you guys just want to listen while you're cleaning enclosures, anything like that, go ahead and just subscribe on Apple Music, iHeart, or Spotify. We should be available on all those platforms. And please don't forget, if you guys are interested in being part of this amazing community where we can grow as new keepers, new breeders together, and advance this community in a supportive, amazing way, go ahead and join our Patreon, the Retic Lounge. We have a bunch of different tiers that you can subscribe to on, as little as $5 a month, and even the advanced stuff and getting into higher levels, you can get the ability to get discounts at our animals and get memorabilia. And what I mean by memorabilia is just, t-shirts, things like that, to talk about the Retic Lounge. So we look forward to seeing you on our Patreon.
As well, make sure you're supporting US ARC. It's really important right now with everything that's happening across the US and especially in Florida. So sign up for their YouTube, their Instagram, those are both free, as well as their newsletter. And then spare the $5-10 a year it takes to become a member, as well as make donations when possible. So support US ARC.
All right, stay tuned. Listen to this awesome episode of what it takes to be a breeder and if breeding is right for you. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, let's talk about this. So is breeding right for our listeners? I guess let's just open a discussion about breeding in general. So I guess just generally speaking, Nathan, what was your first experience like breeding?
A nightmare. It was awful.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't have the typical first experience. I got a mail sent to me last minute saying, "Hey, do you want to breed these two animals together?" And I was also going through the worst back pain in my life leading up to my back surgery, not able to do much with my snakes. So, yeah, it was a trial. It was something I had to decide how bad I wanted. So, I apparently pretty bad.
So you got the opportunity to produce a phenomenal clutch that, I mean, just speaking to the quality of your animals that you produce, you were able to send those animals over to Garrett. I Reach Out Reptiles to Sell. Talk about like the pairing, how that was like.
Yeah, so originally I was contacted by Joe Hull. He's a Reach Out Reptiles employee now, but at the time he was stationed over in Korea working with our armed forces. He had a pretty substantial collection that he had built up through Garrett and a few other sources, and had let's see, he was a 25% Kalatoa, 25% Jampea, Golden Child, Anery, Sunfire, Tiger, and then we thought he was possibly het for albino. That didn't prove out. And I feel like I'm forgetting a gene, but If it comes up, it comes up. And then threw him over to my 75% Kalatoa, 12.5% Jampea. She is a purple albino, and she proved out het for Anery with him. So that was really nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
What were the breeding ages of breeding ages, but what were the ages of those animals that you paired together? Because there's a lot of talk about breeding retics, and there's a really big discrepancy in terms of like the breeding age of like a mainland retic versus the breeding age of Superdorf and Dorf crosses and so on and so forth. Like, people say that mainland males can breed as early as 10, 11 months old and have good clutches. And really a male Superdorf at 10 months old is literally still like that big. So,
Yeah,
what
I
ages?
mean, yeah, that I don't have enough experience to say for sure. I can tell you my brief experiences. So my first pairing that went remarkably well given my circumstances at the time. Uh, you know, the female was about 4.5 years old. She had great size on her, great tone on her. You could tell she was, about full grown. She was just putting on muscle at that point. She wasn't too lean, she wasn't too fat. She just looked really good and just fed her really hard that year and showed all the signs of wanting to go. And I believe the male was also around 3 or 4. Uh, Joe Hole would have to correct me on that, but because that was his animal. But I do
Okay.
believe he was around at least 3 when we paired.
Yeah, my as a matter of fact, so like my very first retake that I ever got was my Coyote, and she is currently now going through the repetition, has had locks, and what I think she's gravid or has ovulated, and she turned 4 in February, so she is roughly about 4.5 years old. By the time that she lays and has her first clutch, she'll be 4.5 years old. So uh, generally speaking, just like to the breeders that I've talked to, I mean Garrett and a bunch of other Eric Lee and other big time reputable Superdorf breeders, it seems like 4 years old is about the age to kind of expect a female. Now it can happen earlier. Doc Murdoch was able to push and breed his Coyote females to 2.5 years old. He was having
Wow.
clutches, which is super young, right?
Yeah.
Just goes to show what feeding and size really does. And at the end of the day, if a female has the resources they feel they need to breed, there's a good chance that they might. And so yeah,
Now,
I
what do you
mean,
say on males?
on males, so
What have you been told? That kind of thing. Because my experience, because the year following my successful breeding, I tried to pair that same female. She showed all the signs of ovulating. She went off food, everything. And I took a chance on a somewhat younger male. Um, I believe he was around 16 to 18 months when I started pairing them. And no problems between the two, but there was absolutely no interest as well. Now,
yeah.
I can tell just in the year that has passed between now and or since then, and he's become a totally different animal. I haven't seen him march yet, but you can just tell he's tuned in a little bit more now.
Yeah, I think there's really two factors when it comes to when males and females are ready. I think number one, age, obviously, but I think size is important too. Because I think generally speaking, you can get a male, and from what I've heard and what I've talked to breeders about, you can get a male to breed at around 18 months old. But if you have a very small bloodline of a smaller medium, quote unquote, Dwarf locality animal, um, and that male is only 4 feet long, I don't think it's going to be successful. So I think that the right age for a Superdorf male is going to be in between the ages of 18 months to 2 years old and a minimum of 5 to 5.5 feet.
He was about 5 when I threw him in. I was really impressed with his size, even though Garrett was talking about his bloodline being pretty small. He for 16 months he was pretty much at the same size he is now. I mean, he's maybe a tiny bit girthier, but he's not a whole lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as they mature more, I would assume that they start to figure out what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, for me to feel confident that a male is going to get the job done is probably 2 years old.
Yeah, I think me too. At least 2 years old, I would.
Yeah.
If you want to be safe, go 3.
Yeah. Malins are a different story. I recently I bought an ocelot male from Aubrey Pruitt, and I talk in depth and have exchanged a lot of conversations with Aubrey. And
Looks like you're wearing our shirt right now.
yeah, shout out to A&B Exotics.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's gotten some of his ocelot animals and mainlands to breed males at 11 months old. And what's crazy is I asked him, I said, do you power feed them? What do you do? And he actually, I'm going to backtrack a bit. Don't want to give any of his breeding tips without his permission. But at the end of the day, he said even when those males do mature and they get to breeding size and they're 2, 3, 4 years old, they're still 9 to 10 foot animals that are manageable size mainland. But he's able to turn around and get them to breed, successfully at under a year old for some of those males. So again, depending on the localities that you're working with, whether it's mainland, dwarf or super dwarf localities, small, medium, large, whatever you want to call them, the age and the size is going to vary drastically. And I think that information that I gathered from Aubrey about getting males to breed that young is why I also feel like size also plays a very relevant factor and not just age.
Yeah, and I'm such a baby when it comes to breeding anything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a total rookie, so I'm learning as I go, and these are all, assumptions and things that I've been told. Males, I've been told 2 years. You sometimes you'll see the super dwarf localities that I'm working with. The males push a little younger than that. Like I said, 18 months you'll see sometimes, but you know, it doesn't ever hurt to be patient and just raise your animals and enjoy the process and not have to put so much pressure on it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they get into this with the mindset of I've never owned a retic and I'm going to breed them. And then what they try and do is they have expectations that, okay, my female will breed at 3.5, 4 years old, and my male will breed at 18 months old. And so I'm going to do all the calculations and everything that I need to. And people don't really understand that at the end of the day, these are animals. And really, when they decide to breed is so out of our control.
Yeah, can't force nature. I mean, you can play around knowing what you know, but that's all you can do.
So
Do
we
your
talked
best to
about,
keep these animals right.
yeah, 100%. We talked about male size and age. What about your females?
So females, I wouldn't even attempt until after 4. I just, really want to make sure that they have the proper size on them. I have a female that's staying super, super small. She's at 4 years old. I could really try to push her and breed her this year, and you know, with my space and my capabilities, I think I'd rather go with my females who are a bit more established and just see how that female raises up another year. I don't care if she breeds it until 5, 6, 7. I just want to make sure that she gets a healthy clutch out and you know, doesn't have anything that's going to be detrimental to her.
Yeah. So slow and steady is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I always want to be safe with my animals. I've seen people try to push their animals that are smaller or, maybe don't have the muscle tone or just the body composition to produce a healthy clutch. I'd rather have a repeat of what I did the first time. I had 19 healthy eggs. I was able to incubate them all to completion. I'm sure I'm going to have hiccups here and there, but I'd like to do my best to, avoid those.
Yeah. 100%. And hiccups are going to end up happening, just like you had that your second year of having a young male, and your females was showing all the right signs, but the male just wasn't ready, and it didn't end up happening. And but yeah, I mean, at
But
the
I
end of the
also learned a
day,
lot about that because I was able to successfully get my females to cycle. Luckily, they didn't throw any slugs or anything like that. Uh, the one female that cycled absorbed, so I was able to learn something from it, even though I wasn't able to, produce any animals. That's, I
such
think,
a good
maybe
point.
even more valuable.
Such a good point. It's always a learning process, and it's always great to be able to have mentors and to have people that can provide you with information. But at the end of the day, the most important factor of being a breeder and wanting to breed animals is to learn the information and kind of just learn from your own experiences and your own mistakes. I made
Hmm.
mistakes my first year breeding that caused that I believe could have potentially caused the outcome that it did, and there could have been some external variables that impacted that. But yeah, absolutely, that's a great point. Um, and yeah, I think 4 years old for the dwarf and super dwarf localities and crosses is a good um, is a good mark and a good feature to aim for. My Kayuati, um, she had some pushing issues early in her life, me being new at keeping retics, and so I got information to try and feed her more, and so I got her to a decent size to where I thought maybe I could try to push her at 3.5 years old. And she told me, in my learning experience, just like you had a learning experience, was that she wasn't ready. And so now that she's 4.5 and she's cycling, and she's has gone through the motions, and more than likely this is going to work out this year. Um, it paid off for that. If I could go back in time, I would have just waited. Right? She showed me that she wasn't ready, and I knew going into it at 3.5 would have been early. Um, and now here she is at 4.5 going through those motions.
I mean, you can try to power feed right before a cycle, but if that animal's not well established right before that, you're not going to make up that calorie deficit that that animal needs throughout the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer that if your female doesn't have the size, especially a first time breeder, doesn't have the size, and she doesn't have the caloric capacity to cycle, she's not going to. They are we as humans, one of my mentors always told me this. We as humans think we know better than our animals, and we don't. They really do know what's best for them. And so at the end of the day, our job is to provide them with a healthy diet, proper feeding, and allow them to do their work. Um, so
That, and I think goes back to just our husbandry episodes, providing an enriching life so this animal's not just an asset to you. It's not just something sitting in a cage that you're hoping to profit off of one day. I mean, you got to spend time with these animals. You got to be able to trust these animals and able, in order to, work with them safely and work with
yeah,
them in a rewarding fashion.
yeah. And if you work with them in that fashion, man, that's such a good point. Words of wisdom from Nathan Katz. Here you go,
I
everyone.
don't, I mean, sure, we'll
So
call it
so
that.
I think that no, I mean it's so true, because I think when people get into this just for the money aspect, is they try to force things to happen, and that's when disappointment, anxiety, frustration set in, and that's just a recipe for disaster for breeders. I mean, do you really want to? I mean, I'm assuming you want to breed these animals because you love them, not just because you want to make a pretty penny, because there's a market for them. And if that's the case, just do things in a patient perspective, and that does your animal um, due diligence, and that you're doing right by them. Because sure, you could probably get a super dwarf cross to breed at 3 or 3.5 years old, or even 2.5 years old, like Dunn Munson. But you are going to be power feeding getting that animal extremely big in a short period of time, and is that really in the best interest of your animal?
Well, I mean, and there's other routes too. I mean, there you see people that are throwing huge investment type money into their breeding programs, and you can get something going within the first year. But I think just like I said, going back to those earlier episodes, just it, I just don't see the reward in that for me. The reward in it for me is growing with the animals, learning about them, learning each individual, just trying to do it as best I can instead of just trying to go straight in and start making a mill of it.
Yeah, 100%. So now that we've talked about breeding age and sizes, let's talk about um, the unspeakable. I almost did like think about it as like he who should not be named, Lord Voldemort type of thing. Like people
I
don't
think I
like
know
to
where
talk
you're
about.
going.
People don't like to talk about how they get their breeders to cycle and like the inside scoop of like how to talk about how to breed their animals. And I'm an open book. I'm transparent. I feel like people should know how to do this and know the inside scoop on how to. So do you want to give some insight on that? Is that what you were thinking about, by the way?
Yeah, that is definitely where I was going. I mean, I feel like I have an okay idea. I don't think I'm 100% on it. I don't think it's an exact science. I think that's part of the mystery that comes with how we get our females to cycle and why it seems like it's unattainable information. But yeah, let's dive in.
All right. Some people might not like us for this, for giving all of you new people on how to breed your retics, but here we go. So I guess I'll start this one on how I get my females to cycle and how to breed. So what I have followed is with mature females is just kind of a generic feeding every other week, every 2 weeks. And I even like to provide like a bigger meal every 3 weeks. On so often. I'm not set on like providing a same size meal on a consistent basis. Remember that feeding your animals is not a cookie cutter thing. I like to provide my animals with smaller meals, larger meals, so forth. But what I like to do is, and I was given this advice by a well-known breeder, and again, I'm not going to drop names just because I don't want people to know like who provided me with this info without having that person's permission to put his name out there or her name out there. But what worked for me really, really well in my successful clutch that hatched out of February in 2022 was giving them a diet of every 2 to 3 weeks, and then 2 months prior to the time that I want to try and cycle. So when I try to cycle my animals is based off of my environment here in San Antonio, Texas. It's going to be different for people up north, further south, out west. In Utah, it's going to be different everywhere, but you have to understand that a large portion of retic breeding is environmental.
Absolutely.
Which means barometric pressure drops, which is the stormy wet season in Indonesia. What's cool is I have sensor push little sensors that measure the humidity, the temperature, and the barometric pressure in my snake room, which is great for me to be able to see. I love to see the barometric pressures fluctuate. So number one, in Texas, for me, that's in the fall time. That's when we start to get hit really hard with storms, and it starts storming and the temperature starts to drop. So a couple months before that begins, that starts to begin around September. So a couple months before that begins, I was advised to give my females a feeding drought. And what that means is giving them one moderate sized meal that's only going to leave a little slight lump giving them one of those meals a month for 2 months. And then after that, allowing the temperature drop and the barometric pressure changes, as well as every 7 to 10 day feedings of larger meals. Larger meals meaning a meal that's big enough to leave a lump in your animal that you look and you can noticeably see a big lump. And when I did that, my year of breeding, it only took 6 feedings for my female to go completely cold turkey off of food. It took 6 to 7 weeks, 6 total feedings for that to happen. And once she was off of food, I introduced the male. And the reason why I introduced the male once she was off of food is because I noticed during that drought of not feeding her often, her feeding response was super intense. And I did not feel safe putting a male in. Now, the year before, I didn't do that, and I could put the male in, and it still was okay because I wasn't giving her that drought. But what I learned from this past year of breeding is giving them that drought and then feeding them frequently after lets them know in their mind that there's a surplus of food available and they're ready to take all those calories in to get ready to build follicles and breed. And that worked phenomenally. So if you are listening to this and you know who you are, who told me this, I can't thank you enough for that tip because it even worked for my Coyote this year and I can't thank you enough for that.
Hey, it worked for me. I did a similar regimen. I wouldn't say I followed that to an exact T my first year, but it was very, very similar in terms of a little bit of a famine period going into a little bit more of a surplus, heavier food items. And then, as soon as I started doing that consistently, what do you know? Off food, ready to have that meal.
Yeah.
And I was already starting to introduce just to get sense going and stuff like that, just when it was safe. I had no negative responses, so I just played it by ear, and I feel like that could have. I don't know what your opinions on this are, but I feel like as you're feeding heavy, throwing that male in every once in a while to just get the hormones going doesn't hurt.
No, I actually did that with my Coyote this year. I didn't wait until she was fully off of food because she wasn't displaying signs of this severe, crazy food response. But what I make sure to do in order to make sure that it's safe is that I take the female out of her enclosure. I handle her. I will make sure that she is fully aware that she's not being fed. And I put her in her holding tub like I would if she was being cleaned. I put the male in. I let the male smell around. I let the male cruise around. I keep the door open. And then I put the female back in the enclosure. That way there is zero mistake of feeding time, right? I make sure that I'm doing something with them that is completely out of left field compared to my feeding
not to say
pattern
something
and
still
regimen.
couldn't go awry, but yeah, you're doing as much as you can to make sure that you're interrupting any kind of food responses that could potentially happen.
No, 100%. And at the end of the day, if a female's
food
not ready,
responses, any battle behavior, anything like that. I mean,
yeah,
when you're breeding these things, you have to be vigilant in making sure that you know what's going on at all times, especially during those first few pairings.
yeah, and that's a great point into kind of caveating into the idea is if breeding is right for you. It's if you've bred ball pythons before, if you bred blood pythons before, breeding retics is not the same because male retics are extremely combative during breeding season. And that's not typical of other, there are other species of snakes that you breed that are like that, but understanding that breeding season for retics it's sketchy. I have males that I trust with my entire life, I would let a 6-year-old hold that animal. But the moment that a female is cycling in my room, that male is a completely different. I'm talking about my 50% Super Dwarf Amel. Gosh, he is such a sweetheart, man. But any time that a female cycles, I can tell he's like my first notice of when a female is getting into the cycle motion, because I'll open his tub and I'll touch him with his hook, in which he doesn't even mind. And the moment I touch him with a hook, he just like is just like throwing his coils at me and telling me, like, back up. And males can be very dangerous during breeding season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a difficult male to deal with just off the get-go, breeding season or not, my first run around. So that on top of breeder hormones, I mean, it was like a rodeo some days. It just, you never know what you're gonna get when it comes breeding time with those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be hit or miss. I mean,
Yeah.
some males don't even react, and some males, are very, very, my wild caught male Calidoa that I had, that I ended up selling, he was so combative with me that the way that I had to introduce him was I had to open the female's enclosure. And this was partially why I introduced when she was fully off of food, so I didn't have to worry about her lunging at me. I had to open up her enclosure, open up his enclosure, use my hook to guide him into the female's enclosure. I always made sure that his enclosure was on top of hers.
Yeah,
So
we
that
did almost the same thing. They were just side by side. He was in a little rack. She was on the bottom enclosure, and most of the time, through just hook handling, is how we had to deal with him, because he was a hands-off animal.
yeah,
I mean, not completely hands-off. I make this guy sound like Satan, but
you
he's
have.
he's handleable. You just have to be on your toes. You just have to give him the respect he deserves. He had a rough start, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would lead him in with hooks, and I'd say a good 60, 70% of the time, he's like, "Oh, going to see my lady." And coming out, I mean, he was a great breeder. So I mean, we were talking at multiple locks every session.
Did you
He
get
was
any
so
of those locks where he like raised her tail up?
uh I would have to look through my pictures. I don't think so, but I mean, definite confirmed locks. He was a show off. Um, but so much so to the point where it was like he was so exhausted after most of those meetings, where I could pretty easily, even though I was going through uh, just pre-back surgery and on IV antibiotics, on tubes everywhere, I still could handle him okay.
That's terrible. What an experience you had.
Yeah, it was weird, but I mean, I managed. I managed.
Um, so yeah, like if you are gonna consider breeding retics, just know that if you have cycling females around, your males might act way out of the norm when versus you didn't have female cycling, and it goes back to what we said before: is don't get complacent with the animal. Stay on your toes, stay alert, stay aware, and be ready for the unexpected. And yeah, I mean, so that covers a good basis of at least breeding behavior with I'm not going to speak much about like the bad sides of it when things go bad with biting and those kind of things, because it
Yeah,
hasn't happened to me, and I
same.
don't feel like it's appropriate for us to comment on that. But just know that is also a possibility of them.
I'll touch on one little bit. Like Lucas said, we aren't going to touch on names. Just, I mean, we didn't know what we were talking about going into this episode. Besides just our personal experiences, that's what this is all about. So I'm not going to name any names. I didn't talk with anyone beforehand. But one of my mentors, he works with some larger animals, and had one of his males out cruising, and just doing some maintenance with him, doing some interaction time, and probably were some cycling females in the house. He was throwing some arches against the walls, and just put his hand in the wrong place and ended up getting some pretty decent lacerations to the point where these wounds had to be butterfly bandaged up.
Man.
Probably stitches would have been better, but some of us guys we'd rather do it ourselves and not have to go through going to the doctor.
No kidding.
I get that, but you're talking about some serious damage that can happen, especially when you start dealing with some of the larger localities, and you just want to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't need a negative experience for you or your animals.
Nope. So be careful. Incubator setups. What do you use?
So, like it or not, I copycat Garrett Hartle, and I use the Igloo incubator setup.
It's worked well for a lot of people, man.
Yeah, I feel like, especially in Utah, where humidity is so big with incubating these eggs, it's just the easiest way for me to maintain humidity. I haven't played around with any other incubator styles. I'd love to get a Sea Serpent's hotbox incubator at some point and play around with one of those. Uh, but if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think the only thing that would ever push me towards one of those hotbox style incubators is just space. I'm working with a 10 by 12 room. I'm crammed in here. That igloo cooler takes up a lot of space, although it can hold. I mean, I don't know how many boxes Garrett can fit in there, but I'm imagining
I
I
think he
could
fits
fit in
four.
at least 4 clutches of like
He
4 boxes.
yeah, 4 box. So it's
Okay.
1, 2. He might be able to
If
fit 6.
no, if I'm thinking about my space correctly, just how I've set up boxes in there, I think I could set up 6 to 8
Oh
boxes.
wow.
My last clutch of
What size tubs?
ooh, that's a great question.
6 quart?
I'll post the link in our comments to the incubator build that Garrett did. He has a lot of great information on why this incubator setup is what he had preferred in the past, and I believe he still uses it even though he tinkers around with some other stuff. Uh, it works well. So I'll put that in the comments below. You guys can dive into that if you want to build your own igloo style incubator. What I
It's
do,
super
just
easy.
very very basic, is it's a reservoir of water at the bottom, two submersible heating elements, just like you would get for an aquarium.
I'm gonna ask that you put the links to the heating elements used because
Yeah, okay.
I had an
This
issue
is yeah,
using
this is
that
a point of
setup.
contention for me as well. So Garrett's video. This is like a disclaimer before you go and watch Garrett's video. I love Garrett to pieces. He is the greatest. But in the video, they show him going to PetSmart, Petco, whatever, and picking out these heaters and fans, and it's all, I believe, Aquion, and it's all
Yep.
50-watt stuff, really low wattage. It could not get my incubator to 88 to save my life.
And
So,
it wasn't
be,
consistent for me.
I, I mean, consistency wasn't ever an issue when it wasn't reaching temperatures for me.
Well, clearly.
And yeah, so quickly I jumped on Amazon, just, found the best reviewed. I believe it's a 150 or 100-watt submersible heater, and I run two of those. In the video, he explains just have two of them just as a backup. If one goes out, you have the other one that can run.
Yeah,
Um,
so what you want to do is you want to set one to the ideal temperature that you want your boxes at, and then you want to set the other one to 2 degrees lower. So
oh, okay.
so he says that in the video.
I,
So
I didn't catch that.
yeah, so what the ideal is that like if one malfunctions, it's only going to drop a degree or two before the other one kicks on. You don't want the other one to be the same temp because if that one with the same temp drops and the other one reads it, you might have a spike up in temperature. So you want to have like a degree or two of a difference between the two for the other one to kick on.
There's a possibility I did and just didn't know it. I believe they were pretty closely set, and I luckily, I mean, it could be my probes in my thermostat that really did the trick in regulating temperatures. I don't know. I run a herb set. But yeah, basically the reservoir of water, those two heating elements, uh, a submersible fan just to push the water around so that you're not getting hot spots in your water. The water's always flowing around and it's maintaining a constant temperature. Um, and then ventilation. Ventilation's huge. I drilled probably 30 holes in this in this igloo. They're all around the sides, around the top. Make sure you have. Routed out some spaces for all the wires to go through, so I'm not running into anything pinching in between the cooler setup. So there's no shorts in my wires. That's really big. I feel like that's something that's not touched on in the video. It's pretty basic knowledge, so I mean, figure it out. Uh, and then, yeah, make sure you have a big enough hole in your tubs to also run a probe right into your tub, so you're measuring the air temperature in the egg tubs instead of just in the incubator.
What substrate medium did you use?
So I just used perlite, just straight perlite. I sifted it, got all the dust out of there. Just kind of, I believe the person I first saw do that was either Barcheck or Hartle. I can't remember. I think it was Barcheck though when he was setting up his eggs years ago.
Yeah, my first year breeding, I sifted it out. The second year when I had a successful clutch, I didn't, and it seemed to be fine. But yeah, I used perlite too. I know Eric Lee uses vermiculite, and I'm curious on I don't know. I mean, perlite worked for me this season.
I mean,
so
like I said with the incubator, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I've seen a ton of people incubate on vermiculite. The only downside I've ever heard with vermiculite is that it can harbor bacteria and produce mold sometimes. So,
yeah,
I mean, you're working in a dark, hot, damp environment. So it's a great place for mold to start, and especially if you get a bad egg. But I mean,
you're
I'm
a dark,
sure
hot environment.
I haven't played around with it. Maybe I should incubate on vermiculite this year and see.
I don't think I'm going to go to it just because I think perlite does the same job, and that's what I've used. And excuse me.
Well,
Still
and I've
getting
seen
over a
people that
little
do
cough.
mixes too. I mean, I think partially why people choose one or the other is also how it retains moisture, or sometimes how they do a mix. Uh, with my incubator setup, it's running at near 100% humidity all the time, so I don't really need to worry about it besides just, wiping off the condensation on top of my lids, making sure
Yeah.
that the eggs aren't getting physically wet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I used the igloo my first year, and I had issues and fluctuations of temps, and I don't know what was causing it. And to be honest,
I mean, that storm didn't help you.
no, not at all. And our crazy winter didn't help me. And then my second year, when I had a successful clutch, I had my incubator running solid, the igloo incubator running solid for like a month, and then I put the eggs in there when I finally had eggs. And then my eggs, my temperatures throughout the day were fluctuating 1.5 degrees, and I didn't like it. So what I did was I found an old school open transparent glass refrigerator on Craigslist, really cheap, cheaper than it cost me to get my igloo cooler, and it was, I think I spent $75 on it. I ran heat tape through the back. That cost me $15. I spent another $15 on fans to circulate the air, just like you would with the water pumps in that, and that worked beautifully.
Yeah,
Um,
heat rises. I mean, so you need to be cycling stuff through so you're not having any heat spikes. The worst thing that can happen to our reptiles, whether they're incubating or alive, is heat spikes.
yeah, 100%. And so I used that, and I built that within like 2 days, and I was really happy with how solid it kept the temps. So I told myself I'd stick to that using that incubator, and then because I had good luck with my clutch and I was able to sell, I decided to invest in decided to invest. Sorry,
Keep
decided
going.
to invest in a uh, Sinful Serpents. Are based out of Texas, but they build the same thing at the same style with a false wall incubator sea serpents hotbox. And so I purchased one of those, just got it. I'm about to set it up and get that bad boy cranking, and super excited to see how that does. So now that one alone I got was like 4 feet tall, fits my 28 quart iris tubs, and I can fit 120 to 150 eggs in that single incubator. And then I have my self-made one from last year as a backup. I don't think I'm ever going to be producing that many eggs for at least 3 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I planned ahead with this giant igloo incubator. I knew I was only going to produce maybe one or two clutches at the
Yeah,
most with it within the first 5 years or so.
yeah.
So
I have expected 3 to 4 maybe this year, and so I figured, I was like, I sold a successful clutch of Calatoas, might as well just get something that is successful and that's manufactured, and I'll see how it works. But I have mine that I made last year out of a just old school gas station type of fridge. If any of you are curious on what the
Red
build
Bull,
looks like, no, not Red Bull, but yeah, I see those.
everyone
Those are
does the
cool.
Red Bull.
Mine has like a cool old 80s retro, like pastel yellow, bluish, red,
Ha-
like
Remind me how big it is. Sorry.
uh shoot, it's about like 5 feet tall. It's a good size. I could fit probably, if I needed to with the egg space, could probably fit 150, 200 eggs in there.
Okay. Yeah, that's giant.
Yeah, and the what's great with the fans and the way that I set it up, one fan on top, one fan on the bottom, circulating air up and down. The temperature only fluctuated 1 degree from the top to the bottom.
That's great. And what are you using to monitor temperatures?
Sensor push, always.
Okay, yeah. Everyone's
So
using the sensor pushes. I mean, I just did the probe just because I was going budget friendly. I wasn't working at the time, so
100%,
every penny counted.
100%.
But
I
yeah, I
would
think
recommend.
sensor push is the way to go.
Yeah, I recommend for anybody to get the sensor push system. So what that requires is you getting a gateway, which connects to your Wi-Fi, and then you get each individual sensor to connect to that gateway. Now, you don't have to get the gateway in order to access temperatures via Bluetooth, but if you're not within range, you won't be able to. I was able to monitor ranges, and that's how I actually monitor my snake room right now. So I'll get notifications. I can set notifications on when it gets above a temperature, below a temperature, humidity. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's just like your
sensor push,
thermostat.
yeah, sensor push is so accurate that I went off of the sensor push temperature and not my thermostat probe, because there's more
Okay.
likelihood of that probe from malfunctioning versus that sensor. And so, like, if I set my probe to 88, but my sensor was at 87, my incubator was at 87. I did not use the 88 from the probe.
Okay.
Um, so incubation temps, I mean, this can be pretty straightforward. Doesn't have to be very long. I like to use a nice happy medium, 87.5 to 88.
Yeah, I think. Let me jump into my notes here, but yeah, I went 74 days on 88.5 degrees. I think if I were to change it, I would probably just drop it down half a degree. Maybe try to slow down the incubation process just a tiny, tiny bit. But no, I think
Yeah.
88.5 is kind of the sweet spot.
And what's crazy is that you said you did 88.5 at 74 days.
Hmm.
My Pure Calatoa clutch hatched at day 83 at 88. So it just goes to show that like there's no cookie cutter way. I mean, it's just every clutch is going to be different. But yeah, if you're incubating in the temps of like 88, expect your clutch to hatch in between 76 to 82 days or so.
Yep, a little bit longer than some of the other python species. So
yeah, exactly.
You got to be patient, but it's still not the monitor game where you're waiting all year for your eggs.
Yeah, and then at that point, man, so let's get to kind of the topic of this and like, is breeding right for you? So like we've talked about age, sex, size, how to set up your incubator, all this good informative information, but now you've hatched babies and now you have to sell them and you have to care for all these babies, feed them, clean them. What was that response? I mean, I know that you ended up you were able to sell your animals through Garrett. What would you think it would be like to have 40 hatchlings and have to clean feed all of those hatchlings until you're able to feed them?
I mean, I would love every second of it because I feel like just interacting with the hatchlings is what just it stokes the fire, right? But it's a ton of work. You know, I was cleaning the 19 hatchlings before I sent them over to Garrett for a couple of weeks, maybe a little less than that, before their first meal for sure. And you know, these things, even though they're just hatchlings, they're peeing all the time. May not be big, but I mean, you're
you don't want them
constantly
sitting
going
on
in
dirty paper, though.
Yeah. And I think with the hatchlings, I am going to rethink Substrate. I don't think it's totally necessary to be going through a whole sheet of paper every single time I need to clean one of those things, especially when the poop's this
Tiny.
big and my whole sheet of paper is, you know. So I think with the babies, it might be a little easier to just go the Substrate route with them, or, you know, I've seen for especially, you know, couple day old until they get rid of that egg skin, just setting up on water.
Yeah.
You know, I think keep it super minimalistic for the first few days. Then when you're setting them up on Substrate, probably go something you can spot clean at first. Then when they start getting more established, I like to switch to paper, just like I said in previous episodes. I just like to keep everything a little bit sterile and clean.
I felt the same way, and I went that route, and I got Baby Chip. So Baby Chip is a product of Retic, which is just smaller pieces of cocoa. And boy, like my very first experience breeding Retic went poorly, and then when it went successfully, I had the babies, and then out of all animals, I'm so fortunate that it happened to my holdback, but my female holdback got impacted by a piece of Baby Chip.
Okay.
And it got lodged in there, and I saw it. It was actually the day that like 2 people came over to my house in Texas that bought their babies, and I showed them my holdback, and I was like, oh shit. And I saw this piece ledged in them, and it took 2 weeks of everyday soaking, non-feeding, and thank goodness I'm 90% sure she regurgitated it. It didn't look like it came out from the back end, and I don't think it would have passed through the back end, or else she would have probably died. So since that happened, I'm staying on paper towel for my babies until they're probably a year old, to be honest.
Okay, that's fair.
It was scary.
I think the only thing I've seen with paper towel that can get a little bit scary is I've seen snakes try to eat the paper towel. That's why, I mean, I'm using the paper in my tubs is all CNC cut. It's all by
that's good too.
Yeah, CMC Reptiles. I'll link them in the comments.
I use them too. I just started using them about a few months ago. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, shout out Ely Guy Serpents. He's the one that set me up with them originally, and yeah, they're great. It's just when you're doing 19 animals, I I can get all the paper ready, throw it
Place it
in within
right
a
in.
couple seconds. I mean, you're doing a quick wipe down. You're not having to soak down the entire tub in F10 when you're doing those baby tubs. So it's pretty quick and easy. You get a little handling experience, get some socialization while you're doing the cleaning.
It's great.
But I
Uh,
mean, those 19 babies, they would take me 30 minutes, 45 minutes,
yeah,
just
man.
depending on
40.
what I had to
Yeah.
go through.
It took me for my 16 about 45 minutes to fresh water, fresh paper.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, if you guys are considering getting into breeding, I highly recommend just understanding that it is extremely time consuming. Um, you think about having to care for the adult and care for the animals. Excuse me, got a cough. Gonna mute. Yeah, you think about the cleaning adults, having to clean all your animals, and then now you have 20 babies that you have to care for. And that's only one clutch,
Hmm.
right? And we're talking about being a quote unquote breeder. What does that mean? That means having 2 clutches, 3 clutches, 4 clutches, 5 clutches, whatever your aspirations lead to, but just understand that it doesn't take a long time for the babies to pile up and for you to realize that, like, man, I am spending a lot of time on hatchlings alone.
And a lot of money too. I mean, when you have 2 clutches of 19, 20 animals, whatever, you're going through rodents like crazy. You're feeding these things every 5 to 7 days, whatever your feeding regimen is, and that's big orders of rodents. You're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars of an investment that you have to make up front before these babies are even there.
Yeah, ready
And
ready to even sell. And then not only that, but how many times do you have a baby not want a meal and then you have to throw out a rodent and you have to
uh,
throw
so
out.
so per Garrett's request, since I did my first clutch sold through him, he requested that all the babies came before their first meal, so I didn't get to deal with
No,
any of that.
100%.
I know there were a couple babies that were a little bit of a hard start, but nothing that nothing that didn't
Yeah.
take too long,
I I actually recommend, like, I actually believe the same thing. If you're going to wholesale a clutch to someone and you're going to send them over to someone, do it before their first meal. So that way they only have that one stressful experience
Yep.
before they even have that shed, or even just briefly after, so that that new person can get them established. But yeah, for
It's the
me,
stress of it all,
I
especially on
had
those
about,
hatchlings.
yeah, yeah. I had 16 hatchlings. Out of those 16, I had 3 or 4 that were not even problematic, but I probably tossed about 20 total rats.
Hmm.
And especially in right now's economy, you know, 20 mice, every penny matters when you are trying to operate and be a profitable business and care for these animals to the best that you can. So getting them to eat, number one, can be super frustrating. And then let's also talking about, like, retail and sales. I know that you handed that off to Garrett, but if you don't mind, I want to speak to my experience of that.
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
Because I was super fortunate that I don't know what the hell I did to be able to get I was able to sell my snakes within 6 weeks,
Stop.
um,
Stop.
which is
You're not giving yourself enough credit here. You may be surprised by the situation, but you know exactly what you did to get these animals sold, and that's just treating people right. It goes a long way in our industry, and it shows what type of person, what type of breeder you are, and the people that you see that are having animals that are sticking around for a long time are the people that ultimately aren't treating others right in this community.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I was able to sell my snakes within 6 weeks. And I worked really hard to be able to put my animals, their entire progression online and connect with people. And anytime someone messaged me, I was able to really give them my undivided attention, answer every question that they have, give them background on all my animals, and was attentive to the questions that they had. And not only that, I had to also vet the people that were buying my animals and make sure that they were capable of keeping a reticulated python. And all that is a lot of work. It can be time consuming to the point where like my wife would get frustrated at me because I was on my phone so much. And I know a lot of you breeders out there that have been doing this for a while can probably relate that like you give so much to the people inquiring, and then a lot of these people don't even give you the benefit of the doubt of being able to respond after you tell them a price, or you even ask a question like, do you have a thermostat? Do you have an enclosure set up? Like, because here's one thing that I think about retail that I think is important with reticulated pythons. Doesn't matter if it's a mainland, doesn't matter if it's a super dwarf, doesn't matter whatever it is. You have a responsibility to make sure that your snake is not going to be a part of a rehoming, adoption, neglected animal, because retics are not ball pythons or other animals that just sit there where you can pick up and clean. They're complex. So when it comes to the retail side, it can get a little annoying because you will have people reach out to you and you give everything to them and they don't respond. But one thing that's a pet peeve for me is I constantly see people in our industry post on retic forums and groups on Facebook about like they can't stand that people reach out and do those kind of things, and like they call them tire kickers, right? And of course,
I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not.
100%.
A lot of the time, I'm not in the position of investing in another animal. But if there's something that blows me away, there's a good chance I'm gonna reach out to you and I'm gonna just inquire about the animal, see what you're asking for the animal, and it's not to fish for anything. It's just because I'm curious. Okay, if I want to get into this project because I am so blown away by what others are producing, I need to know how much I need to save up to stop kicking these tires.
No.
So and but as a buyer, you also need to be transparent in your in your
100%.
dealings. I mean, every time that I go about asking about an animal that I know I can't afford, it's always all right. Well, I appreciate the information. I don't have the money available right now, but I think this animal's great. I wish you luck on the sale. It's always my intentions are always clear so they can go on to the next person and try
Yeah.
to make their sale.
And I think as a buyer, that's important to do. But here's what I cannot stand is that breeders have this idea that all of potential buyers need to be serious when they inquire. Because I see oftentimes like just breeders expressing frustration of tire kickers, quote unquote. You got to understand, if you're getting into breeding retics, you are a part of retail. Retail is like owning a clothing store. How many people walk into Macy's and leave without buying a single thing? All the damn time. How many people walk into Foot Locker, look at shoes, try them on, and leave without buying a shoe? All the damn time. So I get frustrated when breeders post these posts about like, I'm sick and tired of people messaging and then not following through and not doing this. And listen, you are part of retail. You are selling a product and a goods. it comes with the baggage. And if you are not willing to accept that, breeding and selling and doing retail might not be right for you. You have to be willing to accept that people are going to knock on your door and ding dong ditch. Period.
Yeah.
That's going to happen.
And your duty as someone in retail, if you want to be successful, is providing great customer service. I mean, that's standard. That's
Period.
middle of the road. If you want to sell anything, have great customer service.
100%.
If you want to be one of these big guys, the legends in the industry, or the people that you see selling snakes like hotcakes now, you need to provide exceptional customer service. And that's providing services above and beyond what your customer expects. I mean, you look at some of the branding that some of these companies are doing now, and the level of experience that you get just when you get an animal by them. That kind of exceptional experience solidifies not only you in that customer's mind, but that animal, since you're going to be working with a living creature, it provides a little bit more value within that animal itself, so we avoid some of these rehoming circumstances.
No, 100%. And here's what I want to say to those breeders that get frustrated with the tire kickers. When you have a tire kicker that I don't know, kicks your tire and lets you down, and then you go ahead and publicly post about your frustration, you're sending a message to people that unless someone is dead serious, it has cash ready to never message you. And here's the thing, the way that I approached it with my animals, because what's crazy, I only had 16 animals from my Kalatoa clutch. I had a list of 65 people that reached me and told me, I want to be on your list. Which, by the way, is why I'll never do list again. And so I reached out to every single one of them. When they hatched, after they took their few meals, and then follow-ups. I did that because I wanted to make my presence there to let them know, hey, you put yourself on a list. I want to let you know you have priority out of people that are not on the list. And when doing that, the people that decided, like, you know what, something came up, I can't buy it, I said, man, you know what, I'm so sorry, no problem, reach out to me if you have any questions. That sends a completely different message. And I guarantee you, for those of you that get frustrated with the tire kicker, if you approach it in the frustration manner, you're losing a lot of customers in the future. Versus just being understanding, empathetic, and just like, for my mindset was like, okay, I didn't make the sale with you, but guess what? My next clutch, I might make the sale with you.
Yeah, one thing I've learned in business through some of my other mentors in other industries is you gotta protect your golden goose, and in retail it's your customer.
Yeah,
so once
100%.
you close those lines of communication, you're killing that golden goose, and
yeah,
that's
So when you're breeding retics and you're gonna get involved in sales, number one, I guess my biggest advice is like, hype up the breedings and the pairings that you're doing. Post them on social media, let them know the information, let them know what's happening, because what happens if you don't do that and then all of a sudden you decide to drop hatchlings without giving anybody any preparation or information? Their first question is, where did this come from? Who are you? And what's going on? And this is for new breeders, obviously. If you're a well-known breeder, it doesn't matter. You're going to produce what you produce and people are going to be like, wow. But for those of you that are just getting into it, build hype. Give them the backstory of your animals. Let them know where they come from, and share the inside scoop. Let people know that, like, people want to know everything about the animal that they're buying in today's day and age. It wasn't like that with Retics 5 years ago. But today, I mean, the world, the day in Retics are changing, where they want to know lineage, they want to know information, they want to see pictures of parents, grandparents, and as far back as they can. So, do that, and then also just if you're going to get into breeding, just know you're going to be on your phone a lot. You're going to be talking to a lot of people. You're going to get a lot of denials, a lot of people that are asking questions and don't buy. And that's something to consider. What's your daytime job look like? How much free time do you have? There is someone out there right now, I won't mention his name, an amazing human being that has amazing quality animals that is really struggling to sell animals right now because he is not up to date with technology, and really posting, and he's super busy in his personal life, and he's struggling to sell animals because he's not able to do what it really takes to do the retail side of things. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, part of the decision in going through Garrett for my first round was, I didn't have the time to dedicate that through my PT, my recovery, the back surgery, trying to get back to work and settle my life back down. So, there's a lot of reasons why someone, would choose an option like that. I don't blame anyone for, if they can, taking the long route and trying to get all their animals sold on their own if they, unfortunately don't have the time to dedicate all the social media that can kind of lead into those sales.
Let me see. So, I mean, we talked about is breeding right for you. We've talked about like the difficult retail side of things, the unpredictability of being able to determine if you're going to have a successful clutch, when you're going to have a successful clutch. Anything else you want to add?
Let's think about this for a second. As my computer freaks out on me, bear with me. Yeah, we covered pretty much everything I want to go over. You know, how we kept our hatchlings. I would love to have had a little bit more experience with that, so I could dive into that a little bit deeper with you. But yeah, I think we covered what we can for our level of experience getting into this industry.
With that being said, guys, I cannot thank you enough for joining us here tonight. Please like, subscribe, comment, give us feedback, let us know how we're doing, engage with us, become a Patreon member, join part of our Retic Lounge community, become a lounger, become a couch potato. A
sofa spud, a lazy bones, whatever you want to be. It's up to you.
Exactly. We got different things to offer you on our Patreon, and I promise it's a great community, positive, and if you're new at keeping retics and you are wanting to breed or just wanting to get more in-depth information, join our Patreon. It's going to be one of the best decisions that you can make, to have a community supporting you, behind you, having me and Nathan to help you through the struggles that we've gone through. Again, we cannot thank you enough for tuning in tonight, listening to us. Catch us next Friday on the Retic Lounge. You guys have a good night.